Okay, now we're going to make a Geovista cable head. This cable here is a 1/4 inch coax. The first thing I'm going to do is just to cut the cable. Now it's probably the 2, 3 or 4 meters that gets the most wear of the cable, so I would recommend that you cut perhaps about 5 meters of cable off. If you've got any nasty kinks further down the cable, you might think about cutting a bit more cable off. Now I'm going to do this just using a hacksaw. You can get really big wire cutters to do that, but you're probably not going to have any, so I'm going to use a hacksaw. I'm going to wrap a bit of tape around the cable and placing it in this vise. And then just with a hacksaw I'm going to cut down the edge of the vise in the centre of the tape, make a nice clean cut hopefully. Okay, there we are. Not as clean as I would like, but we'll see how we get on with that later. Right, now, easiest thing now to do, I think, is perhaps to unscrew the spring from this body here. So I'm going to hold that in the vise, and with a pair of pliers we can just slowly unscrew this spring. And then once you have all the pieces in parts, you probably want to give them all a good clean. This is quite a new cable head, so it's all nice and clean. Yours is going to be muddy, so give it a good wash under the tap. That'll come off the end of the cable. And this cable body here will also push off the end of the cable now. It's just tight where I've cut it. It's opened it up a little bit. But good hard pull and that comes off. Right, now the first job is to thread these back on. Now this is where we need a nice clean end, so I'm going to put some glasses on and just trim some of the wires back a bit so we can get an end where we can allow us to push it through there. I'll cut some of these strands back a bit. First part to go on is the spring. We can get that on yet, whether I need to cut some more strands back. There's one little strand. She's gonna go. There we go. through. Got to get it past the strands that I've cut now. That's it. So we've got the spring on. The next thing is to try and get this part on. Couple that haven't gone in nicely, so I might just cut those. Twisting it as I push. There we go. Okay. Right, that's that bit. So I got the spring on first, and this body part of the cable head. Now, you can reuse the old cone parts, but it's probably a lot simpler to just buy some new set of cones, and this makes the job a lot quicker and easier. So I'm going to use a new set of cones now. So we slide the cones, go in like this, and the cable comes out and around. So we want to put this outer cone on first, and then we slide the inner cone on. So again, this is another awkward job trying to get it past this hole. Put that in the vise to help me. And again, I might, this is cut a few back just to make it easy. I haven't got quite as much to hold on to when you're pushing on this. There we go. All the way. There we go. Right, so I've got both cones on now. Okay, now it was quite an awkward getting those in. It really depends how nicely you cut that. Perhaps I could have tried a bit harder and put a bit more tape on and cut it a bit better. But it was quite rough after I cut it, but I thought I'd carry on. And the way I got round that was just cutting them lower down and pushing and picking up these loose ends as I push them down. Okay, so the next step, you just want to unravel all the strands. So I'll start by getting some of these loose ones here. Unravel the strands, I straighten them out just on this piece. That bit there, I try to straighten out all the bends. That's where it's going to go past, go into the second cone. So I just want them sitting nicely in there. Well, this takes a little bit of time, so we just need to take our time and get it done nicely. Slowly getting there. Now, with coaxial cable, okay, so we've almost finished unwinding the individual strands. With a coaxial cable, what you do need to do is just to keep 2 or 3 strands out. And what we'll do, we'll join those together with the screen, which I'll show you a bit later. Almost there. So I'll try to lay these down as neatly as possible, and this will make it easier when we are closing the 2 cones together. So we're just going to do one more, and we'll leave 2 strands sticking out. It's quite thick, these strands, so I'm just going to leave 2. Okay. So I'm just checking that these are laying nice and straight as they come off, and I don't really want them to cross over as with the other strands. It's unavoidable when we're using all of them, but as little as possible. Okay, so now I need to get the outer cone, which is this one here. Take it out of the vise, and then we're pulling them all down, and we're feeding them into the outer cone now. Slowly but surely, we're getting them all. Just use the vise a little bit just to help me pull them down. And we've got some of the shorter ones up there that we need to make sure we catch as well. the shorter ones, so I'll make sure I can get those in. There we go. Is that all of them? No, one's escaped. Just make sure we can get this one in as well. There we go. So I'm trying to slide this up to the inner cone, and then we'll close them all together. And pulling down a little bit, that's it. Keep going. There we go. So I pulled it down as hard as I can by hand. On the next part we just want to close up just by knocking these two together. Now I have done things in the past by just putting that carefully around it and banging on here, but it's easier if you can get one of these tools made. So this has got a centre hole with a slot here to take this part of the cable, and then a surface there that will fit on here, and then I'll hammer on here. So I'll get this through here. There she is. And that sits on top of our cable and our inner cone, and I can now carefully knock these two together. Let's have a look and make sure it's all going down nicely, and that's good. Right, so I've closed it up. I think I can get it a bit tighter than that. So what I'll do now is go and just get the washer that sits on top of there, just to give it a few more gentle knocks. This is the washer, so I'll put that on. Thread that round again. I'll give it a few more nice knocks. Let's have a look. So we've almost closed that up quite nicely. A couple more. think that's going to do it. So let's take that out of the vise. So that's our rope socket closed up nicely there, and I've left 2 armour strands coming out which we're going to join onto the screen. Right, so the next job is just to cut the strands here as close as possible to the outer cone. Now you need a good strong pair of cutters. These are the ones I'm using. And I'm going to put some safety glasses on as well, just in case anything flies up. Again, best to do it slowly and cut them one by one. There you go. So I've cut all the strands off as close as I can. They're perhaps within 2 or 3 millimeters of the outer cone. And then will sit in this part of the cable head eventually. Sure, I think we'll slide in. Right, so next we want to join the screen of this cable to the armour here. So let's put that gently in the vise. This out of the way. So I'm going to strip back the outer plastic here, which will reveal the screen, and I'm going to take that back to about perhaps a centimetre from the washer. Starting about a centimetre from the bottom, I'm just going to make a score mark with my scalpel or with a knife. Deep here, that's not a problem, and I'm going to cut it where I've gone deep and grab hold of it, and there we go, and that should rip off down to where I've started. There we go, so I've taken that back to about a centimetre from the cone, and that will like the tear off, or you can use a pair of wire cutters to cut that off. So put that back in the vise, and there's a foil shield. I'm just going to get this out of the way. We're not going to use this. Maybe it might fit it. Right, well, twist the screen. Right, so let's have a look at what we've got now. So we've got the centre conductor, the shield, and 2 strands of the armour. Now the idea is we want to join those 2 together down here. Turn the solder line on ready. Now, what I'm going to use just for this is just like a crimp. This is just a ring crimp, and I'm just going to cut away the blue plasticky part. Okay, I think this should be a good size. They come in different sizes. Blue is perhaps about the medium size, and there's a yellow and a red. Red's the smallest. But I think I should be able to thread both of these through here. Yeah, I think that'll work. So I'm going to cut the ring part off as well. We're not going to use that, so I'm going to cut that off. So I've made just that round tube. Okay, I need to slide my little end part of the crimp down to the rope sockets. It's just a matter of trying to get it started nicely. So I'll push that so you can see to about there. Okay. Now I want to crush it down and close it down now. Now you can use some pliers just to squeeze it. I've got some crimping pliers here, and I'm going to close it down with my crimping pliers. Make sure I've got both ends of it. Okay. And what I'm also going to do is flow a bit of solder around it as well. There you go. And cut off all this spare length here. So I've joined the armour and the screen with that crimp there. Now what we will do is tape all that up with some self-amalgamating tape, but first we need to fit our electrical boot. This part here is actually going to rest onto this washer. Okay, that's going to fit onto that washer, and you can see there's a pin in there, and the electrical contact's going to attach onto here. So a good distance to cut this cable is about 68 millimeters actually from the washer. Okay, so I've cut that 68 millimeters. Put some silicone grease on the end of my boot, and I'm sliding that down. That's it. And then strip the insulation away, about 4 millimeters or something like that, 4 or 5 millimeters from the top. We're going to solder this connection onto here. So first I'm going to tin this with some solder. And then I'm going to fill the solder side of this socket, and then while it's still hot I'll place it onto the connection. Okay, so get that nice and warm. Push it onto there, just hold it nice and steady just where it solder goes cold. There we go. So we've got a nice solder connection there, and we're ready to slide the boot over. I put a bit of silicone grease inside the boot, and we'll slide. It's useful to have a spare feed through, so you can actually put that in there and push that all the way up, and that's a good guide to make sure it's all going in properly. The boot should actually cover the bump inside the feed through, so the feed through sits like this and covers that bump there. Alright, so the next job is to bandage or to tape up this piece here with some self-amalgamating tape. So this is our self-amalgamating tape. Put some tape in between the centre conductor and here. Okay. The self-amalgamated tape, if you pull it, it will stretch, and as it stretches you can get it to stick to itself. it off. Push that down to make it stick. Right. Oops. Now, trouble is, if you've got greasy hands like I have now, it doesn't tend to stick, so let's put another turn on. Let's take that turn off. Tidy that up a bit. That's it. Okay, so that hopefully will sit onto there. And now it's useful to have a pair of tweezers just to push the boot onto the feed through. It looks about right, actually. It looks quite nice. You can see that when that's fully on, that'll go on and there'll just be a slight bend. The feed through, that's inside there, looks like this. You can unscrew that with this key. That's it. And it might be worth you doing that, and then you can give a good clean inside here, and you can make sure all this is nice and clean. Clean it out with with just water and a little brush and a rag, and you get rid of all the mud, and then you can put some fresh silicone grease on the O-ring. And then that will screw back in. There we go. Now you need to remember to fit the nut over this body, and then using a pair of tweezers you can slowly guide the feed through on the boot assembly onto the feed through. There we go. So you can see I've made the electrical connection now by pushing the boot onto the feed through, and there's just a small gap there, which is fine, which is as you want it really. So once that's tightened up, there'll just be a tiny bend there in the cable, which is about right. So I'm going to place this in the vise now, like that. Let's just make sure we can see that. I can push that up, just lock the vise, push that up so there's no chance of the cable getting damaged. This will slide up. Once the thread's engaged, okay, so the threads are engaged, so I'm holding the cable and turning this part here, so I'm not twisting any of the electrical connections. I think make sure both screws are loose so they don't catch. Got a bit tight there, let's try using power pliers. This one's loose as well. was it? It was just that key there that was stopping it then. So I can go a bit further up. So. Okay, so that's gone tight now. And the very little, the last quarter, half a turn, you can just use a pair of grips and just to tighten that up. I'll get it. That's the cable's turning now as well. That's nice and tight now. So I'll just push that safe. So there's our cable head. There's a little small bend in the conductor, but that's okay, that's not a big problem. And our boot is fully home and fully engaged onto the feed tree. And that's it. You also might want to change the O-rings if we're doing a cable head service, so we can change those. Slide them off like that, and then you can fit new ones on. These ones are actually quite good, so I'm going to leave these on. The last job is just to refit the spring. And tighten up that one locks onto the thread. That one onto the rope socket. There we go, our finished cable head.